All right, so I think we're all ready. So at 6:01, we'll call the meeting to order. And so can we start with attendance?
Yep. Dave Pemble.
Here.
Scott Gergen.
There, I can hit the button. I'm here.
Welcome, Scott. Lisa Hadid.
Here.
Brian Davis.
Here.
Becky Beisel, we know she's gone today. Stephanie Malm is here. And Kelsey Waits.
Here. All right, so do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. And you know what, this does remind me, when we are taking votes, if you can make sure that you turn your audio on for those votes, because it's difficult for Becky to see if someone is just raising their hand for a vote, since there are so many screens going. And so if you can make sure to make that audible, that would be absolutely wonderful. All right, so do we have an approval of the minutes from the May 20th regular board meeting?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, so just a recognition of the visitors. We do have a couple of folks on the call with us today who are going to be presenting, and so thank you for coming. And to anyone watching us on Facebook, either live or after the fact, thank you for tuning in and watching the school board meeting. And as always, please feel free to reach out with questions. All right, so moving right along, we have some good news items. So I don't know, Bob, do you want me to take all of it? This is kind of our first meeting here with our new superintendent, Dr. McDowell. So welcome as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think, Kelsey, it makes sense for you to take those.
Okay. So we had a very successful senior graduation. There was a very high turnout with cars, with the students coming by, and they really seemed to enjoy it. I know Mike Johnson had gotten a lot of feedback from folks saying thank you and that they really appreciated the event. I enjoyed being there, and it was really wonderful to still have kind of that personal send-off for students by calling their name. And so I'm glad that we could pull that together and make it work. At the middle school, we also had a send-off parade at the middle school as well as the parades at the elementary sites, which were really great for the kids and for the teachers as well, to kind of see the students one more time in person in a way, and just to get that connection for the end of the year. We also had a retirement parade for those employees who retired during the 1920 school year. And I just want to say that if you go to Board Book and you can look this up, the amount of years of service that these folks have put into our district and our schools is absolutely incredible. And so with the 10 employees on here, they have a combined total of 269 years of service. So on average, that's about 27 years per person who retired. And I just think that's absolutely amazing. A number of these folks have been with the district since the 1980s, and they've just, contributed and been a part of the schools, and we very much appreciate them. And so I do just want to make sure we can read their names and just acknowledge them. Tim Collins, Kathy Keys, Carrie Schmitz, Marcia Crandall, Jim Huberti, Pat Rebarchek, Dana Liebrand, Susan Herlam, Julie Malm, and Jane Matson. And so thank you all for being committed to this district and, being a part of our district family for so long. And we really appreciate you, and we wish you well in retirement. So does anyone have any other comments or things to add there? All right. So items for discussion. So we'll go into the wellness survey presentation with Mary Ellen. And so you're going to be sharing your screen with us, correct?
I will, yes. So
Okay.
I'm Mary Ellen Fox, and I'm the Health Services Coordinator for the Hastings School District nurse. And part of my job is to be the chair of the Student Wellness Committee, and we're called the Smart Choices Committee. I think it was 2015, but I can't remember for sure, that there was an update done to the student wellness policy. It's wellness policy number 533. And in it, one of the requirements is that there is an annual report given to the school board. So that is what this is. So I'm going to share with you the student wellness report. And this can be found on the school website. If you go to our website and you go under, I'm gonna not say this very well, but under the, actually the food services, the Smart Choices website is on the bottom left side of the left column, and then you click on that and you go under news and you can find this report. So here we go. So here is the report. This year, it's been an unusual year, as you know. We've had parent newsletters were sent out that included various things to parents, and actually went to all parents in the entire district, which was wonderful. We've been researching something called Move Mindfully, which is a way of helping kids to help with their stress, but also do movement. And so we're looking at getting a grant through the SHIP grants. And so we had some of our staff went to a training to experience that. And it's something that the state is going to continue doing, SHIP grants. So we are going to be applying this fall for that, to have that as an initiative in the elementary schools. As part of the survey, to give you this report, we needed to do some type of survey to figure out how we are doing. And so we chose this year to survey students. And so right now, that's what you're going to be hearing about, is how students responded to the survey. And then our committee met 4 times, and our 4th meeting was via Zoom, which was a successful meeting. So students at the elementary schools were asked when they were home during COVID distance learning to 3rd and 4th graders at the elementary schools were surveyed, and then also middle and high school students in their FIAD classes were asked to do this again during distance learning. And if you click on the link, and school board members, I did send you an email with this. Hopefully you got it. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it ahead of time or not, but there, I'm going to click on this. So the elementary students basically said they feel pretty active. These are different activities that they've done, and they've had. They're saying, we wanted to know how many kids were getting breakfast and lunch from the school district. So that was we actually added that question this year. And Kennedy had a huge response of more kids responded from Kennedy than the other 2 elementary schools. But basically what this is saying is that more kids got the lunches than didn't get the lunches. And then this doesn't read very well, but students are eating some fruits and vegetables, and they are being pretty active. The question that I really zero in on is, do they feel safe? And right here you can see that the total number of kids here pretty much feel pretty safe. Now they're at home, so that's the other thing that's a little weird. So the survey was taken last year and this year and previous years, and I'll just go back to that in a minute. But so anyway, in the elementary world, 70% of the students were getting lunch or breakfast either consistently or sometimes during distance learning. 93% of the kids feel safe or mostly safe. 98% of elementary students listed at least one physical activity they do outside of gym or recess. There is some concern about what's going to happen with COVID. And so we're looking at how we can provide some support for mental health in the when we come back to school. Middle school is very similar, and also high school. Strengths are that we have a lot of physical activity, that a lot of the kids, the large majority of the students feel safe, and room for improvement is provide healthier food. At least that's what they say. Now, last night I compared, this is the one survey I was able to do this with really successfully, is compare last year's results to this year's results with the middle school kids. And this is actually striking to me. Now, granted, last year kids were in school when they did this, and this year they were at home, so I'm not quite sure what that means. And it was also a different group of kids, because the kids that were 8th graders last year moved to be 9th graders this year. So it's not the exact same group of kids, but across the board, everything, the percentages are up. So they're saying the food is healthier this year. They have more opportunities to be physically active. And I don't know if this means when they're at home or if their perception of food at school is healthier. They're saying that they have healthier coping skills this year to manage their stress. They're saying they are less stressed now than last year. And the bottom one, I feel safe at school. This is the agree and strongly agree. Last year, 70% of kids said they felt they agreed with that statement. This year, 90% said that. And when you look at the high school results, it's actually, it's very similar. It's 85% of the high school students say they feel always or mostly safe. So that, I don't know, it's just, that was very interesting to me. So our goals for this next year would be to use the information that we got from the student surveys to help guide our goals for next year. We're going to support efforts for emotional and well-being, mental health well-being as we transition back in the fall to whatever school looks like in the fall. We are going to be moving forward with applying for the SHIP grant for Move Mindfully. We will continue the parent newsletter communication. And I'd like to include next year's student wellness survey to ask the question of gender and diversity, because that is something that we don't have information on. And though 90% of the students say they feel safe, there's still 10% that don't feel safe, or in a range of things. So I think we really want to have all of our students feel safe. And then we would like to explore some opportunities for health education in the elementary levels. So that is the nuts and bolts of it. If you want to go back and look at this, this is on our website, like I said. You can look at the actual student comments. Some of the ones that I felt from the high school that were particularly interesting. One student said they wanted to have a course added that's dedicated to teaching just about nutrition. They thought, another student said, talk more about how to manage and cope with stress. Let's see here, teach students how to manage stress and mental illnesses like depression, teach ways we can be less addicted to our cell phones, make gym mandatory all 4 years, improve on getting vapes completely removed, because I know that vaping has been an issue in the school. Have a program that encourages people in minority groups to report harassment and bullying they experience anonymously, and then they wanted to have some consequences built into that. So those were ones that kind of jumped out to me that were comments from some of the high school students. What questions do you have? Thoughts?
I really like that you want to add in the questions about gender and diversity, just as we try to figure out if there's a connection between the students who don't feel safe, if there's kind of a common thread there, or if there's, I mean, maybe there isn't a relationship there, but I think having more information to try to tease that out is important as we try to make our schools safer for all of our kiddos. So I really appreciate that. I just wanted to point that out. Any other questions?
Hey, Mary Ellen, one of the things that I kind of got the gist of from your presentation, and also I just kind of heard through the grapevine of my own kids and some of the kids they know and parents, is that it seemed like there was a cohort of kids that actually thrived within this distance learning environment. And I'm wondering if you or your group give any thought to why that might be. Is this something where they feel safer in their own homes? Is this something where, socially speaking, at school, things haven't gone the best? So they were actually saying, well, thank goodness, I don't have to be worried about social issues at school or being bullied or whatever's happening. Have you given any thought to why it is that the kids were so comfortable at home worth that?
If you go out and look at some of those responses, I think that some of the students spoke to that they didn't have to deal with those particular angles of stress this last bit of school, which to me then says all the more, I mean, not only do we have the stress of going back and being together and the concerns about infection, but then we also have that added layer of anxiety that some people very truly experience in the school setting. So yes, I think that is a real thing. And I do know that there's some students that were thriving with distance learning. And there's others that were not. There's others that are lost.
Thank you. I just think it's something that obviously we're going to have a focus on. I think that one thing that this did bring about is probably some learning that we may not have seen as obviously as we get to see now, having had to go through it for a few months the way we did.
Yeah. One other kind of, I don't know if you guys have thought of it this way, but one of the reasons why I think that the distance learning was successful this time was because we already had the established rapport in all of the classes with the teachers. That will not be the case this fall. So that is an additional concern or a layer of concern that we really need to be cognizant of as we're starting the fall, is how do you build those relationships, not knowing for sure. I mean, we're going to be in kind of this quagmire of how do we start out the school year? And yes, we're going to be in classrooms, but will the classes actually be together? I don't know that they will. So that's going to be a real challenge.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments about the survey? Oh, Lisa.
I just want to comment that I appreciate showing even though those very different experiences from when the survey was given last to students and when it was given this year, I appreciated seeing that data side to side, and I feel positive. I feel positive about how the majority of our students feel in our building. Obviously, there's always areas for improvement. I like that in particular, the number of students that commented on being active. I mean, when you look through the comments, they're kind of funny, you know, playing with baby goats, but that just felt very positive, and it felt to me it represented the students actually engaging with the survey. I mean, that is the kind of answer that an elementary student would give. So right. I felt like they actively engaged, and it was positive.
Good.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you for all of your work on this, as always. And we'll look forward to kind of, you know, any more updates that come from it. So.
Yeah. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Mary.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Next is the official district postings update. You know, the attachment is kind of, we have the information from South Washington schools and how much they were charging. I will say, as an update, I recently signed on to the Hastings Journal, and I was number 402 And so, we talked about needing 400 people in the area, and that was a number of weeks ago. And so if we do want to put out an RFP, it sounds like they do have enough.
Hey, Kelsey.
Yeah.
So today we looked a little bit further into the state statute, and there's a state statute that says that basically to be a qualified newspaper, they have to meet, like the circulation requirement like you referenced, but it's also that they have to have met those conditions for at least 1 year. So we no longer feel that this new newspaper is an option. So we would be recommending that for the 2021 school year, we go with Pioneer Press. And then for 21-22, we would reevaluate and possibly look at using the new one.
Okay, that sounds good. Can't argue with statute, so that's all right. So do we have any questions about that update there?
Does that have to become an action item then, Jen? Do we have to take a board action on?
Item, yes.
Okay, so we'll need to move that down to the action items.
Yeah, so I would move that designation of the official district posting become an action item for tonight, if that's appropriate practice.
All right. Do we need to officially move that? Like make a motion for that? I don't. Dave, your Robert's rules.
I think Lisa just did make a motion.
Well, but then do we need a second? I mean, if we needed to make an official motion, then I need to get a second on it.
Yep, I will second that if needed.
Okay. Okie dokie. Any discussion about that?
Just
Bob,
to
you're
point-
muted. I don't know
Yeah,
if you said
just to point out that this ties us in just for the short term. So if the Hastings Journal becomes a viable option, down the road,
Right.
we can certainly pivot.
But right now, we're just moving this to action items.
Right.
Or, yeah, so.
Yep.
All right. Then I guess all those in favor of moving this to an action item, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So we will bring that down to the action items. I have a note for myself, but Becky, if you can help remind me, since it's not in board book, it's so easy to overlook that. Next up, summer community food security update.
Yeah, so I'll give that update. And then I also have Brittany Hirschauer on tonight too, so that if you guys have additional questions, we should be able to answer them. I am going to share my screen really quick. Do you see my PowerPoint? Yes? Okay. So we just wanted to give a quick update of what we did in June. So we had meals available to all children 18 and under without charge. There was a sign up required. It was breakfast and lunch, and it was available for pickup on Mondays, and they would get 3 days worth of meals. And then also on Wednesdays, they would get 2 days worth. And we had 6 locations, and you can just kind of see those locations and the times. And we were doing approximately 2,500 meals per week. So I feel like that's a pretty substantial number. As we look into July, what we're looking to do is to continue to make them available to all children 18 and under without charge. Sign up still being required, still the same days, Mondays, and they would get 3 days worth, Wednesdays, 2 days worth. But in July, we'll have to move to just 3 locations. And those are really the approved locations based on the area eligibility requirements. And we have submitted applications to use the additional sites that we had in June, but they have not yet been approved by MDE. So again, it's not really something that we have a choice in. We're only able to use an approved location. And then we're looking just to reevaluate again in August to determine if the need is still there and if the sites are, meeting the needs and the hours and all of that. Any questions there? Lisa?
Which of the sites, do one or two of the sites have the consistently highest use? And if we lose those, I think it was 3 sites, how many people does that seem to impact based on June practice?
Yeah, so the district office has been the most used site, and that will continue. Our Saviors has also had a large number, and that one will continue. And then we're adding in the high school, but you can see we'll be dropping off Hastings Family Service, Crossroads, St. John's, and Pleasant Hill Library. So I don't know that I have those numbers right in front of me, but Brittany, you could maybe speak to that.
Sure. So the district office has traditionally been the highest number that we're serving. After that, it typically it's kind of a toss-up, but Our Saviors is usually the one that's the second one. Crossroads is sometimes up there a little bit too, but typically it's district office and Our Saviors. And then Hastings Family Services averages about 30. Crossroads Church is around 40. St. John the Baptist Catholic School has been about 15 every week. And Pleasant Hill Library, that's the one that kind of fluctuates between the 30 and 40 mark. And that's how many families we typically have picking up at those locations.
Thank you. So then the other piece of information I wanted to share tonight is just, we've sent this out to families in a mailing. We're also having it available at our meal pickup sites, but there are some additional food benefits available in Minnesota. So it's for families whose children were between the ages of 5 and 18 on September 1, 2019 and received free or reduced meals during the 1920 school year. There's an additional $325 per child in funding available to help pay for groceries. There is an application that families would have to fill out, and the link is on there, and there is a deadline of June 30th. So we're getting close to that. But we have tried to share this information multiple ways.
Okay.
That's all I have on that one.
All right, great, thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Lisa?
All right, this is the problem with split screen. I can't get my mouse in the right place. I think this is maybe a question for Brittany. And just to confirm that we've had both sufficient staff. I know there's an MOU later in our action items tonight, and that you feel good about the food supply chain. That's just an assessment of current practice, current status.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So yes, we do have, I believe we have enough staff. We have about 14 people, and we're doing a rotating schedule for everybody. So every week we rotate so everybody's able to work. That seems to have worked out really well. And right now, food supply chain, I haven't had, I need to knock on wood as I say this, because everybody I've talked to is having issues. But what I did is at the beginning of the year, when I knew that we were going to start doing this, when I came on board, started working with Jen and with our food supplier, and we looked into getting prepackaged items then. And since we have our wonderful warehouse, I did some stocking up of some things so that could stay frozen. And we're just doing your typical summer meals for the students. So as of right now, I haven't had any issues getting items in.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? All right, sounds good. Thank you for all of your work on this, and just keep us posted, I guess. Hopefully it continues to help our families. Next up is our CARES Act impact. An update on upcoming fund transfers. So Jen, this is you again.
Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things. Okay, so let's see. So here, for the CARES Act, the Hastings Public School District is receiving about $350,000. There's two different funds that it's coming from: the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, and then the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. But the total is the $350,000. The guidance that we've received is that the emergency assistance is for COVID-19 related needs in our schools, such as meeting the needs of historically underserved population, mental health supports, technology and access, cleaning supplies and materials, summer learning needs, or other local needs. The time period to spend these dollars is from March 13th, 2020 through September 30th, 2022. So as a district, we have started conversations to identify proposed uses, and some of those possibilities include professional development, summer planning time for fall preparedness, one-to-one technology initiative, reviewing internal facility use and COVID preparedness plans, and possibly the 1920 fund transfer to community education for the emergency child care, which kind of leads us right into the next topic of the fund balance transfer. So we had talked about before that per the executive order, school districts were required to provide care to eligible children during the school day free of charge. Upon school board approval, school districts are authorized to transfer operating funds for the cost of providing that care. Community education staff provided this care from March 23rd through June 5th. So the approximate amount of that transfer is going to be $143,000. And that's based on a 50% kind of cost sharing between the district and community ed. That transfer and resolution needs to be completed by November 30th at the same time as like our end of fiscal year financial report. So we'll look to bring that forward again, probably in August or September. The number though is pretty much finalized, the $143,000. Any questions there?
No, so even covering that, then we'll have about $200,000 left to discuss the use of and where that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. Does anyone have any questions or comments about all of that? You know, we have a lot of unknowns coming up for what the fall is going to look like. So I feel better knowing that we have something there to kind of work with this summer should we need to do additional planning for the fall. Right. All right, so then next up is the recommended budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, so I'm gonna share that document also. It is in board book, oops, and it's also in, it's also on our website. Okay, do you guys see the budget document? Yes, okay. So this will be the adopted budget for 2021. This timeline we've reviewed before. I guess, you know, the only thing I'll add is that, you know, we'll continue to improve this over time. But for right now, this is our budget timeline. I won't go through it detailed. This page is basically the same that we reviewed at the May work session. There's just been some very minor changes. The overall total is not changing a whole lot. But if we look at our adjusted pupil units for 2021, the total is 4,710, which is about 18 less than what we had in 1920. And again, that number is based on our prior year October 1 MARS data and then projected forward based on prior year data trends. On October 1, 2020, a new projection will be done for 2021 and future years. So as far as the revenues go for the general fund unassigned, the general ed formula increased 2%. The total there was about 400,000. We no longer have Harbor Shelter, so that's a decrease, and we also will no longer have the Solar Garden sign-up bonus, so that's a total of 220,000. The athletic participation fees that were approved at the last board meeting, that increases our revenues by about 35,000. And then our special ed aid is going up by about 228,000. So our total change to the revenue budget is 437,741. When we look at the expenditures for the unassigned budget, our payroll expenditures, so teacher's contract, they allowed for moving a step and 1.95% was added to the salary schedule. There is an estimated savings for 4 resignations or retirements in there. The principals, admins, and supervisors are still an estimate, so those contracts have not been settled. And then all other contracts are per negotiation estimates, which is moving 1 step and 2.5% to the salary schedule. And then our health insurance increased 2% also for 2021. So the total of all of that is 880,000. And then we had some staffing increases that were since the 1920 revised budget. You can see what those are, and I won't read them all off, but they do total just over $1 million. The one thing to note on that is that we are being conservative at this point and kind of waiting to see what the fall might bring before we're filling some of those positions. So it's a possibility that not all of those positions will be filled. Other expenditures, so purchase services, that's with District 917, that's increasing 118,000 approximately. Our property and liability insurance is still an estimate, and we have another action item later tonight to approve those, but that is a significant increase. It's going up $93,000. Canvas Health, we've added 2 FTE. And then communities in the schools, 1 FTE, so that's another 56,000. And then just other miscellaneous programs throughout the district are $9,000. So the total change to the expenditure budget is 2.168 million, and that net change from the previous budget is 1,730,560 that we are overspending. Our fund balances, so our actual 18-19 ending fund balance was 13.5 million. Our projected for 19-20 is just a small increase, so approximately 13.6 million. And then the projected ending fund balance for 2021 will be $11,910,000. So this revised budget will be done in the fall, and it needs to be updated for the following items. So the actual student enrollment, staffing due to student numbers, principal, administrator, supervisor contract, final negotiated amounts, actual hires versus the estimated salaries for the open positions, the property and liability insurance. So you'll see what I have getting approved later tonight is a worst case scenario. They're still working on negotiating that rate, and we anticipate it going down a little bit, but that will be updated. There'll be a new study for the GASB OPEB pension accumulated sick leave study. The legislative changes to revenue and expenditure calculations, if any, and then adjustments based on our audit for 19-20. And then just the last item I have is the CARES funding that we just talked about. I don't have that in this budget. basically because we do have to write a grant or, write a grant application identifying what we'll use those dollars on, and then we'll have corresponding expenses. So I'll add those into the revised. And then I also don't have some of the unknown COVID related expenditures. So we don't know at this point exactly what scenario instruction will be under in the fall, but we would do an update at that point. I can just kind of keep going, and then at the end, if you have questions, we can address them. So this page, this section here is all of our restricted fund balances. So those are all accounts that we can only use the dollars for a specified reason. In that, we actually have a pretty healthy balance. It's when we get to the unrestricted that we're overspending. So again, this was our projected fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. Our revenues are about 49 million. Our expenditures are 41. So it's overspending by 1.6 million. If we keep kind of just looking through this document, there's a lot of detail in here that I won't cover everything, but just know that, you can go back and look at it by fund. So Fund 2, Fund 4, 6, 7, and then all of the trust funds are identified. This revenue is by source. I think the key thing to mention there is that, again, we're getting the majority of our revenue through state aids. It's about 76.23%. When we look at our expenditures by object, if you add up the salaries and wages, the employee benefits, and the purchase services, that comes to 96.66% of our budget. So that's all of our people type expenses. The next page is just for the other funds. So it'll show food service and community ad, same way, same with the expenditures. And then the expenditures by program, if you add up all the instructional and instructional support, that comes to about 82.14% of our budget. So we're definitely spending the money in the instruction and support areas. Our staffing is increasing for 2021. So this has an additional community ed teacher built into it. It has an additional 3rd grade teacher, the 3 additional special ed teachers, the board certified behavioral analysis position. It's got an increase of 0.4 for a speech teacher, a 0.5 for an ESL, and then it's got the middle school counselor and the high school psych that were approved recently. This page will kind of look at this in another way, but here's all of our, well, I guess the one thing I'll mention on that last page is just that we do have a referendum that will expire at the end of the 23-24 school year. So you can see here that that revenue goes down. So we'll need to, come up with a plan prior to that. And then if we look at the enrollment, so here's 2021 grades pre-K through 12 will be at 4,285. And then you can see that the enrollment is decreasing. So into 21-22, there's a decrease of about 17.59. But then into 22-23, there's a decrease of 62.02. And then at this point, 23-24 is a small decrease of about 6. And then 24-25, again, it's a decrease of about 41. So we do have to continue to prepare for the decreased enrollment. At this point, I can take any questions.
All right, so from my screen now, I can't see if anyone's raising their hand, so feel free to jump in if you have questions.
Okay, this is Lisa, and I don't necessarily have a question. I know projections is just based on the best case that we know and what's happened in the past, and all of that is very up in the air right now. I would like to remind everybody that per our policy 714, which is I think our fund balance policy -2, I don't know why it's -2, but it is, that if we approve a budget that's this negative, which I would propose that we do. I support approving this budget, and I support all of the things that we added. I think we have to do that. But when we make that approval as a board, we are also at the same time directing the administration to undertake developing a financial plan that gets us back to balanced budget. And so that is an existing policy. And I know Jen knows that, and I know Bob is very much looking forward to this wonderful opportunity to excel. But just to point that out, that every decision we made leading up to this point was, I think, for important things. And I support doing it. And now going into this next year, it's going to be important to have administrators lead us through that pros and cons and balancing in their free time.
Yeah, and I'd like to go back to kind of, and I think Scott put it great at, I don't remember how many meetings ago that was, talking about the tactical versus strategic and how we knew we needed to add in these mental health positions. We knew we needed to add in more special ed teachers and what that was going to look like. And we knew that this kind of deficit was going to happen based on what we needed to add. And so as we looked to make these decisions to add this, how we continue to look at the big picture and how do we get out of this deficit? What does that look like, and what is our strategic plan to handle mental health issues that our students are facing, for one, and what does that look like? And so I think we have a lot of conversations that are going to be coming up, and I hope we're all ready for them. So I think Bob looks ready.
Yeah, we've already started talking about it. Jen and I and the team at district have already started talking about it. I've already, as of today, kind of sent a message to building principals to make sure that they're well aware of where we are and what it is, because they're going to need to be a part of this, as well as probably some of our teaching and other staff. But there are going to be some difficult decisions to make as we move forward in the short term, because you know, as you all are aware, a deficit spend in year 1 exponentially changes in year 2 and year 3 and year 4 if you don't do something sooner than later once you know that you're deficit spending. And so unfortunately, we're going to be in that conversation not too long from now. But we'll get there.
Yeah. I have confidence in this board. So does anyone have any other questions or comments? No, I'm not seeing anything. All right, thank you, Jen. All right, so the next bit up for discussion is talking about forming an ad hoc discipline policy committee. And so just a little bit of background on this: the policy committee met, and we know that the discipline policy is one that we really need to talk about, but that this is something that needs input from other groups. And as a reminder, we have an agreement with the teachers in their last contract about the behavioral support committee. And within that is the discussion that they would be a part of the discipline policy. And so, I mean, they would have already been a group that we had talked about bringing in to have these discussions, but just a reminder. And so we did talk about getting a group together to do this work. And so in discussions, since Scott is on the behavioral committee, that he would do work with the discipline policy committee. And then since Brian is on the policy committee, that he would go into this one as well as our 2 board members. And so the behavioral support group that we have with the teachers does not allow us to have 2 board members on it. We are limited to 1. And so having an additional board member to discuss this with and to talk it through kind of come up with the policy around it. So the policy committee kind of wanted feedback, see how you felt about that, trying to get that started, and going from there. And Stephanie or Brian, if I'm missing anything, please feel free to hop in and fill in anything. Lisa?
Yeah, my only question was about why this wasn't going to be dealt with inside of policy, and I think that's good to get Scott coming over from the behavior support. I just want to make sure, or I would like to encourage the group as it goes forward to make sure that we have ongoing legal consult during the development of this policy in particular, just to make sure that we're in good alignment. This really touches everybody, students, staff, very close to their daily practice, and I want to make sure we're square on that.
Yep, I think that's a great point. Brian, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I just picked up on that. So Lisa, I think the first thing you said is why it didn't stay within the policy committee. Is that what you asked?
I just had put myself as a personal note when I was reviewing the agenda, but I feel comfortable after Kelsey's present.
Oh,
explanation.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, that was the bottom line.
And then that was it. And then my second piece was just to make sure that we have ongoing legal insight on this, just because I want to, this is daily operational stuff, and I want it to be really right.
No, absolutely. Not only legal input, but we're going to have to get even input from law enforcement. When do they step in? When do they not step in? That kind of thing. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, Scott, with you being on that behavioral committee, if you can talk to the group and just see how they would like to be a part of this, since this is in their agreement, kind of figure out how to move forward with that.
Yeah, it was in their agreement for a 1-year period. So I think that's something that we will need to reach back out to them. It was, I believe it was part of a MOU.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we may need to re-engage with EM Hastings to see how they would like to proceed.
Okay, great.
Just as a heads up, just so you folks know, just as part of the policy committee work, I have already started digging into 506, and because of how long it's been since we had really kind of gone through it, it's kind of, let's just put it this way, there's a lot of pieces that need to be added and retooled and so on and so forth. So I think the sooner we figure out who all needs input on that, the better off we'll be. But I'm making a run at it now, just so you know. So at least we'll have something to start working off of.
Okay. Yeah, well then I will leave that to, as an ad hoc committee, we don't need to approve that or anything. So I will leave that to Scott and Brian to figure out how to get that set up and organized. And obviously Bob and I can continue to discuss, and Stephanie with the policy committee, and figure out if there's, a specific way that this should be organized. So thank you very much. All right, next up is, wait, oh no, I clicked something. Okay, administrative reports. So school board committee reports, we'll start with student enrollment. And that's just our snapshot that we get every month, just for the board to take a look at, or for anyone who wants to look on board book, just giving the update on how many students have transferred either out of the district or into the district. And then, yeah. So our enrollment in June of 2019 was 4254, and our June 2020 enrollment is 4218. So just shy of a drop of 40. All right, so the facilities committee summary. So the facilities committee met on June 1st, and we really continued our discussions around the high school retaining wall, which I had brought up last month as well, and how our initial budget for this was about $5,700, and now the budget looks like it would be $35,000 to upwards of $50,000, depending on what type of repair we go with. The committee felt that we were comfortable going up to the $50,000 mark to repair this, but that we would also like more information on the long-term maintenance of whichever plan we're coming up with. So for example, the rocks that we have there now, they're not sure that they've ever been resealed. And so that's something that should really be resealed every year or two. And so that's part of that issue that we're seeing them breaking down like that. So with whatever plan we come up with, we also want to have that maintenance plan in place to be taking care of it, because we don't want to come back in another couple of years needing to, again, repair this wall. The middle school auditorium bathrooms came in about 6% higher than projected. The facilities committee felt comfortable with this and green-lighted moving forward with the improvements. This will include updating the bathrooms to comply with the ADA requirements, as well as increasing privacy. The middle school administration did mention that they were interested in adding in an additional privacy bathroom somewhere more towards the middle of the school. They didn't give a specific bathroom in particular, and so we did ask them to kind of come back with their first choice or second choices, just to see kind of what that would be and what the cost would look like. We also continue to look at our updated list of bond projects, and that has been narrowed down based on what can be covered by long-term facility maintenance dollars. And the facilities committee, we actually asked to kind of go back to that community list that was created, at the beginning of this project, because we had initially struck out some ideas in order to narrow it down, and to kind of bring that back up and see if there are any of those projects that we would like to move in at this point, since we do have remaining bond dollars. So it's kind of the summary. And if I missed anything, Lisa or Dave, please feel free to hop on. Okay. Do you have any questions, Brian?
I don't know if it falls under the facility committee or where it falls, so just looking for some guidance on this. The whole incident at Todd Field, is that something the facility committee takes on in terms of our insurance and how that gets taken care of, and where does that sit? I don't know where that even camps out.
I gotta believe that lays on Cam's desk. That feels like operational to me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that would be
But
something
if Cam does not want to raise his hand, this would be a good time to unmute.
But I do think that if we talk about adding in any of those, I don't know what they're called. Yeah, that might fall on facilities there, but.
Right. So Cam, where does that sit, since you were about to unmute there, bud?
Well, everything has to go through insurance. So Jen is the contact that insurance goes through. So I've been getting quotes on everything to send to her to get approval from the insurance adjuster. So we've had a couple contractors come look at the field. We had the manufacturer come look at the field. We had 4 fencing contractors take a look at the fence on the outside, and we've got 3 companies looking at the stands themselves. There's an I-beam that was twisted, and it's a big safety concern, especially if we have 200 people in that section of the stands. It has to be safe for them to be in. So we're just waiting for the manufacturer for the stands to get back to us so that we can get those quotes off to the insurance company.
And as a follow-up to that, Cam, I hate to be the guy to ask this question, but is our insurance going to subrogate back to the driver's insurance on this over the deductible piece?
That I'm not sure. That might be a better question for Jen. I don't believe the driver had insurance.
Of course not. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and we don't formally know the answer yet to that. So I'm sure we'll find out soon.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Then moving on, the right along with facilities is the building construction fund update. Jen, did you want to go over that with us just quick?
I sure can. Okay, so this is kind of the same format we've looked at for the last couple months. That top section lists the projects that have been completed, and then it shows the remaining funds. So if we look at the total of what's remaining and we add in the contingency that we haven't yet identified to go elsewhere in the interest, it's at about $5.3 million. The second section is projects that are in process, and that's got the big middle school improvements, which we have to just keep remembering in the end, we think is probably going to go slightly over budget. And then just the ones in design, there's a little over $1 million in design. The future projects, so I have been adding line items, you know, so I transferred out a contingency for like the early childhood improvements, the high school athletic field parking lot addition, and the addition to the high school retaining wall. So at this point, we're about 83% complete on the overall bond dollars.
All right, thank you. I appreciate getting the update each month. And so thank you for that. And thank you, Lisa, for putting in the request to have that quick update every month. All right, any questions on that? All right, so next up is the policy committee. So Stephanie?
Yeah, so the policy committee, we met twice since I believe our last meeting. So May 29th and June 18th. I know at our work session, we talked about a few different things, in particular with merging 510, the student travel, and 610 with the field trips. When we met again on June 18th, we talked pretty extensively about what that actually looks like. And we collectively came together and want to make a recommendation to move forward with this policy, knowing that, so, you know, we talk about this tactical plan and then the strategic plan. We need to have something in place, or we should have something in place now. And then when we have our strategic plan, we'll definitely revisit that to make sure that it aligns. But what we discussed with merging 510 and 610, it now becomes 610, and defining why and when the school board would sponsor a trip. So, you know, Kelsey, do you want to, I'm trying to find the words to, or maybe Brian too, when it comes to like an extended trip, when we would approve it and when we wouldn't.
Right.
So defining that, do you know, do you want to help me out here?
Right, so we had talked about if it's in line, and this will be easier once we have a strategic plan in, you know, set up. But if a trip is in line with what our strategic plan is and what our goals as a district are, then the school board would approve it, and the school board can take the initiative to kind of be the organizer behind it. And that would kind of cover that equity piece that we had talked about if the school board decides to approve it. If the school board decides not to approve a trip, that doesn't mean that the students can't go on it. That just means that the school board is not sponsoring it, that it wouldn't be publicized by the schools, and that that would be organized outside of kind of our role and outside of administration, and that would just be organized separately through whoever wants to run it with like a travel agency. If a teacher would like to go on that trip as a chaperone, then it would be on their time, and they would be able to work with the travel agency and things like that. And so it's just letting it be that the school board can decide when to sponsor a trip and when not to. And then that decision will be made more clear once we have that strategic plan set up.
Thank you, Kelsey. We added in verbiage regarding who has the discretion to cancel a trip. So making sure that we have it in writing that the superintendent has the ability to, at their discretion, to cancel a trip. And then we fine-tuned the verbiage regarding the crisis management plan. And I believe in the in board book, it's towards the very end. I believe it's the last policy in board book. You'll be able to take a look at that if you haven't already, to see where we put that in. You know, just making sure that, okay, you need to have a crisis plan before this goes forward, before it can get approved. And then, like with a lot of policies, there's policies that feed into different policies. So the reference to 903 with visitors to school district buildings and background checks. So when we have a chaperone, when we have an adult, I believe we put in over the age of 18. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey and Brian, but even if it's a senior who just graduated and they're going to a summer trip, they're over the age of 18, they may be subject to a background check. I think we're online there. Just making it clear that we're doing the appropriate background checks on adults that are going on these trips. So that then feeds into 903 and making sure that we have the appropriate verbiage in that policy for those checks, for those background checks. And I'm highlighting the big portions that we talked about. Brian had already talked about, and Kelsey, we discussed the discipline 506. That's another really big piece that we're going to have to sit down and really, and then it came out that we should probably do this ad hoc committee to make sure that this is a fine-tuned product before we approve anything. The facility use procedures, so 902A and 903, Carrie Gore has discussed this with an attorney, and it has the appropriate wording in that policy for us to feel comfortable making a recommendation to approve it so that it meets the intent of equal treatment and that it's legal too. And then with 903A, I don't believe this is in one of our items for review later. Not quite yet. It's getting there. It's a product that is getting there. That is the procedures for school visitors and volunteers. But we talked about that, and yeah, what we talked about specifically with that policy that I want to bring to your attention is that the approving or denying volunteers or visitors, there's like a list of, you know, when we do background checks, what kind of things might flag somebody from preventing them from visiting or volunteering their time. We want to add in their, you know, like criminal convictions. You know, a traffic violation, probably not going to be a big issue, but if they have a DWI, we're not going to ask them to drive a vehicle with students in it. Along those lines, adding in, I didn't see anything in there regarding domestic assaults or abuse type of convictions, regardless of what level it's at. So we were asking to add that in as another criteria, because that is statistically, it's an issue. Like if there's a domestic abuse concern, it's probably a systemic issue all around that could affect the kiddos. Trying to think what else. Brian and Kelsey, please chime in if I am missing anything. I've talked about 506 and 418. That is the drug-free workplace We want to make a recommendation that this is adopted before the fall. And what was added into there was the cannabis-based products verbiage, so i.e. CBD oil. And that's to protect the nurses from administering non-FDA approved drugs. So if you look at that policy, you'll see that we put that information in there. So that's what I have for that update.
I also believe it was part of that policy stuff that on that one, that we have to communicate that one very carefully to make sure it's understood that the student can't even have in their possession. If it's something that parents wish administered, they have to actually leave the campus grounds. You can't even be on campus doing it.
You're right, Brian. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And it's important that, you know, we can't, if it's not approved by the FDA, we really need to be careful about bringing it onto campus to make sure that it is drug-free. Yep.
All right, Mary Ellen, did you have something that you wanted to hop in there with?
Yes. So Stephanie, you're a nurse, right?
No, that would be Becky.
That's Becky.
So yes, the state does have parameters set for schools on that what you were just talking about with the marijuana and the hemp, the products that are containing that substance. Also, when you're thinking about field trips, I want you to consider students that have health conditions. My understanding is we cannot discriminate against students who have health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a student that has a specific health need, we need to be able to provide for their health care while on a field trip. So sometimes there have been issues like we'll hear about something at the last minute. I'm speaking as a nurse here. And it's like, oh, well, we're just walking this way. Well, no, that's still a field trip. You're leaving the school grounds. We need to provide for the students' health. They have diabetes. No, you can't just go. So technically speaking, we should be able to stop that field trip from happening if we cannot meet those students' needs, because we would be discriminating for that child because they could not go because of their health conditions. So I don't know what you're putting in that, but I just wanted to make sure that that was on your radar.
Yep, thank you. And we have brought that up in talking about the policies and about the equity concerns. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to distinguish between if the school board approves something, if it's an approved trip, because if the school board does not approve a trip, then that doesn't happen. We don't have to ensure equity. And so for us, that was one of those things where we said, we don't want any kiddo. If this is a trip that the school board feels is part of our curriculum, is part of the experience of school, we wanted to approve that so that we could continue to make sure that we could provide those kids anything they needed, whether that's for a medical condition or an interpreter or anything like that. And so that was in our discussions, yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other comments there?
Lisa?
Yeah, I have a super broad, embarrassingly basic question, but I figure I'll just expose my lack of knowledge to all. And thank you for that summary, Stephanie. That helped a lot. I think I'll still have some individual questions as we go through each policy. But I've noticed over the last couple of months that I've seen some language about mandatory policies that are getting reviewed at the policy committee and brought in. Actually, I have 2 points. One, could somebody clarify for me what mandatory means in this case? Is that a state statute requirement? And then 2, this excellent conversation that we just got to watch with Mary Ellen stepping in with her insights. I know that you've already considered those issues in regard to that policy, but on the broadest level, I want us to make sure that the administrators that are closely touched by policy, and I'll bring this up on some specific examples later, the administrators closest touched to policy are participating in the review. Whether that's just sending it to them in advance of the policy committee and saying, hey, we're taking a look at field trips. This is what we're thinking about healthcare. Are we in the right place? And I think maybe that's happened on a couple of other things recently that got brought forward, and maybe that hasn't quite happened yet. And so just as a practice, that would be great. But if somebody could just explain to me what mandatory means in this setting, I would be very happy. Thank you.
I guess I can jump in. There are certain pieces of policy that are mandated by the state that have to be part of policy, and some of those things can actually affect our funding if they're not indeed in there.
So is that a statutory requirement? Is it statutory that says you have to have a policy?
Yes.
I don't know, 613 or something. I'm just making that
Yes.
number up. It's probably a
Yes.
real number, but okay.
Yes, some are mandatory.
But it doesn't
some we
have
can
to be.
skip.
It doesn't have to be the MSBA based policy. You just have to have a policy with that
Correct.
number and that topic.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just the MSBA policies. Typically, their boilerplate language is a good jumping off point, but no, it does not have to be per that. It just has to be in there in some form.
Yeah, and Jeff had noticed that we were missing some of these policies, and so we've made a priority getting them approved. There any other questions for the policy committee? I don't see anything. All right, so then we will move into our action items for tonight, beginning with the consent agenda. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Can I ask Stephanie, does that include change order number 12 as it's recommended in board book, that the motion is the consent agenda including that?
That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you. I'll second that.
Yep, so that includes the change orders, bills payable, and the personnel report. All right, is there any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, items for individual action. As you can see, there are a lot of policies. So the policies, if we're not comfortable with approving them tonight, we can move them to an additional reading, and that's totally fine. So first up is policy 534, which I'm trying to pull up.
I think it's the meal one.
It's not loading for me, Kelsey. Are you
No,
getting?
me neither. Yeah, it's not loading for me either.
The first page loads for me, but I can't go beyond that.
Mine either. That is unfortunate.
Okay. All right. Wonder if it'll load. Well, it probably won't load on a different device if you're not having any luck either. So just reload my page and see if that'll work. All right, I'm it's still not working for me, which is unfortunate because this is the one that we've done many times. So we can try to come back to that one.
Yeah, none of the policies on board book are loading for me. I don't know if anybody else is having issues.
Oh, yep, you know what? None of mine are either. All right. I am going to
In the bottom corner of mine, it says something like waiting for PDF sparkdata.com. So I presume it's a board book website problem.
Mm-hmm.
I did log out. I'm going to try to log back in.
All right. Is Becky on still?
I just texted Becky. I'm going to see if she can
Yeah,
send them to
just-
all of you as a PDF.
Okay,
and then
mine
maybe
just
share it.
opened.
Mine just opened.
I was gonna say, it just, as we were sitting here, the buffering stopped, and now I can open it.
Yeah, mine just opened and I was pulling up the drive where we have everything too. So I just need to get on to board book on my other device and I can share the screen too.
Yeah, that'd be great because it's still, oh, nope, there, magic. Okay.
I just wanted to think today.
Yeah. All right, so policy 534 is the unpaid meal charges. And so we've been discussing this one since we could meet in person, which is a long time ago. And so we haven't really made any big changes on this. And so we can see, does anyone have any questions about?
I think the big change that we made, well, it's not really even a big change. It was just a verbiage thing. So it used to say families, and now it says like parent/guardian. So that was a big one from the last meetings that we were able to modify.
I'll move to approve that one.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approving policy 534, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So next up, these policies are up for a second reading, which also means we can approve them tonight. So first up is policy 721, which is the grant guidance for federal revenue sources. And so again, these are all just mandatory policies that we need to have. So do we have a motion to approve policy 721?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up is policy 620, credit for learning. And so this is the one that we discussed last month where we had gone in to talk about the weighted grades and how we had removed that section from MSBA's policy because we don't weight grades. Do we have a motion to approve this policy?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up is policy 612. Again, this is still a mandatory policy, and this is the development of parent and family engagement policies for Title I programs.
So move.
Second.
All right,
Can I,
is there-
point of
Yeah.
discussion on this one? So this is an example of two things. One, this is a policy directing the development of a policy. We're directing the administrators of the school sites to develop a policy to do this. And maybe I didn't catch that on my first read last month, but where we call out policies are developed by school, I would certainly feel more comfortable if that policy was developed by the team of elementary principals and was uniform across our 3 sites, and a similar practice was used. And then there's not a timeline included in this or a checkpoint with the board. It's just a direction to do it. I think that a timeline would be helpful. And then on the broader level, this is a policy that I wonder if it has already been coordinated with the elementary principals. This would be an example of one where it directly impacts their daily work. And I would like to know that they've at least read it and had an opportunity to provide feedback before we get to an adoption point.
And just a point of clarification, and this might be with that. So administrators can't develop policy. only the board can develop policy. Administration can develop a procedure.
Okay,
But
so then the language probably needs to be clarified in here, because this, if you read it, the only reason I say that, and I would tend to agree with you, Bob, and that's what caught my eye this read through, is that it does say to the school administrators to develop a policy to do this. So I think there might just need to be a little bit of clarification. And then I would appreciate that there was that I knew that in our case, elementary principals had reviewed it and that it was done by the group of the three, which they need some sort of cool name, but the group of three, so that as families moved or as boundaries moved, that the way that they engaged with the school felt common.
Right, and I know Jeff had reached out to Matt, and I also know that we're kind of in this funky transition time here with Jeff leaving and Bob coming, and so absolutely, like you mentioned, that maybe there's some wording we need to clean up, and also if Bob would like to, reach out to the elementary principals and make sure that this is in line. Becky.
Just brief here. I do know that Matt Esterby did get back to Jeff and let him know that it was okay, that everything was okay as it was written, as it aligns with how they do things now. So he did look over it and get back to Jeff.
I guess for the sake of having a mandatory policy where we're supposed to have one, it's not beyond the pale for me to approve this as it stands now, with the idea that it would be on the very short list to be cleaned up. I don't necessarily feel like maybe we go back and bring it back in a month. That might be easy too. Just clarifying all schools, not singular schools.
I think Lisa has a point. I think we want to make sure the verbiage is saying what we want it to say. I think we want to make sure of that, because we want to make sure that we're putting the right things in administrator hands and we're keeping the right things in our hands that are supposed to be there without any ambiguity in the language we're using.
Yeah, and I think we've already waited this long for a policy. We can wait one more month as we make sure it's done right. I don't have any issues with that. I would rather wait a month and push through the right policy than not. So we will move this one to a third reading for next month. All right, so the last of our mandatory policies then is 427, which is workload limits for certain special ed teachers.
I think at the end of the day, this is the one that, do you want me to wait to discuss till we've made a motion on it? This is just struck me as odd, because I think what it says is the director of special services gets to decide about workload, and they should decide these certain things. They should decide it based on these certain things, which I think is our current practice. And maybe Dave has something he could contribute here, but I don't know why this gets its own policy. Why wouldn't you say the same thing about any, like why wouldn't a food service person have a policy about this?
And I think Dave is still on, right? Okay.
I am here. Yep. So Lisa is correct. That is our practice right now outside of the caseload limits that we have that are already defined by statute. And so we have statutory language that already speaks to certain early childhood caseload limits and caseload limits for some center-based programming like our LEAP and our Bridge and our STARS programs and programs like that. For the majority of our special ed programming, that is left up to the discretion of the director, the assistant director of special ed in conjunction with, the superintendent or assistant superintendent to make recommendations based on what is reasonable, because there's a lot of variables involved with the decision making with that. It's not just a numbers game always with that, like it is with some of the other higher need groups of students. And so that is our practice. Yes, Lisa.
Do you know, Dave, why this policy exists at a mandatory level? mean, if we have to have it and it's our current practice, that's fine. You know,
Is this the, forgive me, but is this the MSBA language that we're looking at right now that you guys just read off? Okay.
yeah, it's the model policy workload limits for certain special education teachers. It's a page and a half of saying this is what we currently do.
I actually wasn't aware that you guys were going to come over that part tonight. Otherwise, I would have looked over the policy language. But I do know that some other districts have adopted the MSBA language with that, even though it speaks to what our practice currently is. I also don't know, to your question, why it even needs to exist when that's kind of the standard operating practice when it comes to doing that for most cases.
Yeah. Okay. And the language says, you know, collective bargaining agreement is unaffected. This is all
correct.
It's just a bunch of definitions and then a statement of things to be considered.
Right.
So.
We do. I mean, Sarah and I, and soon to be Megan and I, do workload analyses in the winter and spring before we're making recommendations for staffing or shifting, and we're always doing shifts of special ed staff because of that. And so when it comes to most positions, resource case managers, speech language, OT, a whole host of positions, we take a lot of factors into account as to how we're determining what the appropriate level of staffing is when it comes to that.
Right, thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions on this policy? No? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve policy 427?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Now these policies are new or substantially revised. They are not mandatory. Just to clarify that, since we're moving into these ones. And since this is the second reading, these ones can also be approved tonight if we wish. So the first policy is 408, subpoena of a school district employee. And so this is something that was, has been on the docket for about a year now. And it's now come to the board twice. This is its second time, but the policy committee was looking at this last year. Just for a little bit of background. So this is just clarifying some of those things. Lisa, you look like.
And as I remember, I'm skimming it right now, and I was actually looking for the one that was attached to the last reading. As I remember, this is straight up MSBA model policy. There's nothing specific to Hastings or unique to Hastings. Okay, that was my recollection.
No, it was just one of those we noticed we didn't have. So. All right. So is there a motion to approve policy 408?
So move.
Second.
All right. Any more discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Motion carries. Next up is policy 419, tobacco-free environment and electronic delivery advices. So this was really updating for vaping. So do we have a motion to approve policy 419?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, next up, policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records. And just a reminder, this was so that the library could get our students' library cards. So that's why this one had come up. So do we have a motion to approve policy 515?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All All right, motion carries. Next up, policy 535, service animals in schools. Do we have a motion to approve this policy?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So these policies are now for the first reading, so they would not be passed tonight. And so that's policy 901, which is community education. So if there are any questions or comments on this for the policy committee, and then we'll take those back to us for our next meeting. Or any changes you see need to be made. Anything on this policy? No? Maybe just another minute. Okay. All right, and then the next one for our first reading is the 902, the use of school district facilities and equipment. And so this is what Stephanie had mentioned Carrie Gore had been working on. And so there was a timeline on this of trying to get this approved by July, I believe. So if there are changes, we would want to make them now so that we can bring those changes to you at the next board meeting so it could get approved. You see anything? Okay.
Nope.
Great. And so then 902A, the form is just kind of an amendment or an addendum that would be put on to policy 902, which is just kind of the information that's already sent out with community ed.
Yeah, and I just wanted to confirm, and I feel confident that I heard Stephanie say this, but I just wanted to confirm that we did get a legal review on this specifically around the definition of the classifications, because I know that was an issue in the briefing prior to the school year about revenues and expenditures. So as long as that's been done, I had nothing else.
Yep, Carrie consulted legal counsel with this one. All right, and so then we have the policy 903, which is the visitors to school district buildings and sites. So are there any comments on this policy for the committee? And as Stephanie mentioned, there will be an addendum to this that we haven't done yet that kind of clarifies the things that would come up in a background check that would make you ineligible. Bob?
I'd also recommend that maybe we have a conversation at the next policy committee meeting around this one, that we establish a procedure for visitors to buildings that specifically outlines what the process will be, so that in the instances that principals are put in a position of what do I do based on this situation, we've got a step-by-step for them, and then that can be attached to this as part of the policy as well, so the public knows how we'll actually procedurally operate.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. This felt a little bit like the previous one to me, but in this case, the language said, here it's asking the school administration to develop that recommendation of visitors' procedures and the requirements. So it would be great to have that in place prior to adopting the whole policy. I'm sure it's kind of crashing up against the timeline of printing. I don't know if they use them in more planners and printing that document, but maybe this is a year it doesn't just quite come together. I'd rather have that visitor process procedure clear prior to printing.
As long as we put it on a timeline and make sure that the principals are aware of it, that's going to be the important part.
Okay.
Kelsey, unmute.
Sorry. All right. I know that was kind of a big chunk. Thanks, Dave. So the last policy to look at tonight for a first reading is the field trips policy. And so this is the one that Stephanie mentioned is kind of collapsing that 510 and 610 together. And you can see the changes brought in blue. And really what we tried to do was bring over things from 510 that we wanted to keep and collapse that into 610.
Can I ask if in the policy committee, and I am so, can see this from both sides. So I appreciate that we're really clarifying the school's going to pay for trips that align with curriculum. That's just going to happen. You know, we're not going to, I don't think, do apple orchard trips and ask kids to pay $5 to cover the bus. If we think it's a thing we have to do, it's a thing we have to do. Was there any discussion inside of the policy committee kind of about that? I am comfortable with the policy, and I think clarification is important. I feel like this is leading us down a path of less trips.
Well, so it talks about how there's 3 areas. So if it is a required trip, the school will pay for it. If it is an optional trip, then we can ask for $5 to cover the bus.
Right, but optional trips are also generally outside of the school day, generally outside of the regular school day, which may very well fit for trips that are currently taken by the Hastings Middle School and the Hastings High School clubs. For example, those fit well inside of optional supplementary trips, and those may in some way align with the curricular component, right? If you're going to go fishing or you're going to go to Boca Chica or you're going to do something that may have a tie back, but it's really about the club and supplement. My sense is many, if not all, and we don't really have all that many anymore, quite honestly, elementary school trips, which occur during the day, during the instructional day, are going to have to really ask themselves that hard question about, are they required or are they optional? I suspect many of them will fall back into required, which is fair. And then they have to fit within our budget going into years of challenging budget. So I want to share that. I don't know if it's a concern. It's a recognition. It's a nervous feeling. And it just has to play into the whole who are we are. But I feel like that is a potential outcome of this policy.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I mean, reading through this for the first time, doing our first reading tonight, and it doesn't mean that the second reading is something we approve. This is something we continue to have these discussions on and try to think of what the implications of that are, and if that's something we want to continue to try to make changes to get it to where we want to. So I think that's a really important point as to, you know, how can this change different trips. So are there any other thoughts on this one, just for the policy committee to then have for our next meeting?
Yes, guys. Any input would be greatly appreciated. This one is it's significant in the sense that there's a lot of gray to it. I think there's some things, to your point, Lisa, during the school day. During the school day, does that fit? Beyond that, there's the whole, well, it's tied to the school curriculum, but it's more loose. For example, Boca Chica. Is there some cultural benefit from that? Absolutely. Does it have to be done? Is it something that if you're not there, does it take away from your experience within that classroom? Probably not. Not everybody goes. So you get into that. And then of course there's also the third level, which we're talking about, which are flat out boondoggles, like the Greece Italy trip. Educational, yes, but not tied directly to any class at all. So any input is greatly appreciated as we try to break this down and figure out the best way for us to approach it.
Yeah. And I'm all for the school paying for things that we think the students should be doing. And if the students should be going to Carpenter Nature Center in 2nd grade and learning about pollinators, then they should do that. That's the best way to preserve it, and we should pay for it. And we should put it in that larger budget assessment and trade-off. wanted to share that I believe that an unintended consequence of this will be, at least in the short term, as we're dealing with challenging budget questions, it might be hard to get elementary field trips. I think some of the supplemental stuff starts to occur more and more at middle school and then up into high school. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's something we'll have more discussions about and make sure that we take that into account as we continue to work on the policy. So thank you very much for pointing that out. All right, so next up on the action agenda is adopting the budget for fiscal year 2021. 2020, 2021, gosh, there's way too many 20s. Anyway, and we did have discussion on this with Jen, but do we have any more discussion on that now? All right, do we have a motion to adopt the budget for 2021?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All
Just
right, all
thanks.
those,
Just a thank you to Jen for pulling this together. I know it's a massive job, and thank you for always staying on top of it. We do really appreciate all your efforts.
yes, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up is the long-term facilities maintenance plan. Are we pulling that up, Jen? Or I hear clicking, so I'm not sure.
I can speak to it. Let's see. I will pull it up. Bear with me for 1 second. Do you guys see do you see the spreadsheet?
Can you make it a little bit bigger, please?
Yes. Maybe. There. Okay, so for long-term facility maintenance plan or facilities maintenance, we have to do a 10-year plan, and there's multiple components of it. So the first piece is the revenue. And I don't know, on my screen, this isn't showing great, but basically there's a formula that's based on student enrollment, average building ages, adjusted net tax capacity, and pre-existing debt service levies. And then the formula allowance is $380. So the easiest spreadsheet to look at is maybe the expenditure one. So let me go back. Here we go. And I'll make it bigger. So if we look at 2021, there's 3 different components. So there's health and safety, which is this first category here. And then there's an accessibility category in the middle. And then there's maintenance projects in the third category. So just some common examples are things like our roof repair, air quality improvements, windows, doors, electrical, mechanical, all of those kind of items. The revenue is both levy, which is local, and aid, which is state. You can see down towards the bottom here that our combination of levy and aid is roughly $1.7 to $1.8 million each year. And our expenditures will vary by year, basically so that we can save up and plan for some of the bigger expenditures. So you'll be able to see that, you know, by year, the expenditures kind of vary. So 21 is a lower year, but then both 22 and 23 have some bigger expenditures. So the detailed expenditures are developed by our health and safety consultant for this first category, and then by Cam for the director, or by Cam Peterson, our director of buildings and grounds. So Cam also joined tonight in case you guys had questions, but I did also put in board book an additional document that had more detail on the projects by building.
All right, so does anyone have any questions for Jen or Cam, since they are both on here? Okay.
Okay, I have just a technical question.
Yep.
What's an EIFS? I was looking at some of the bigger expenditures, and I know out year is always out year, but I could not figure out an appropriate.
I'm gonna let Cam answer that one. Unless he gave up on us.
He's still there.
Well,
Sorry, my
he's still
service
signed
is a
in. That doesn't mean he's there.
spotty
Oh, he's
here.
there.
I'm here. So EIFS is short for Exterior Insulation Facing System. So up at the high school, we have certain areas that have this, it's kind of like a really hard foam on the outside. It's in the areas that you see that are kind of a yellowish white and then the red. They just put it up instead of putting brick up. And we have some water that's coming in. So we don't have leaks inside the building yet, but we may in the future. So there's a few different things we can do with that. We can either take it off, put new on, which is a 20-year product, or we can face it with metal, which is probably 50-year. But it's short for exterior insulation facing system.
All right, Lisa's giving you the thumbs up if you can't see her. All right, any other questions on this one? All right, do we have a motion to approve the long-term facilities maintenance plan?
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 It looks like this maybe is supposed to be a roll call vote.
Oh, you are correct. It does need to be a roll call vote. Thank you, Lisa. All right, Stephanie?
All right. Dave Pemble,
Yes.
Scott Gergen,
Yes.
Lisa Hadeen,
Yes.
Brian Davis,
You're on mute, Brian.
Yeah, I hit the wrong button. Yes.
Stephanie Malm, yes. Do I say Becky Beisel and then just state that
No.
she, yeah.
Yep.
Becky Beisel, not present, and then Kelsey Waits.
Yes. All right. Next up is the approval of the master agreements for community ed license committee. Wait a second. Why did it just pop up that a motion has already been carried on this? Anyway, motion to approve master agreements for the community education license coordinators and technology support group. I was just making sure I wasn't in the wrong thing. All right.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So next up is approval of the changes to the pay equity review and updated position descriptions. And so we had talked about this at the work session last time. So in the discussion, I just want to go and explain it again because we have gotten a couple more questions on it, and I just want to make sure that we do.
Is anyone else losing Kelsey, or is it my connection?
Nope, she's fine on this end.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Scott is frozen on my computer.
Frozen.
Or he's miming.
No,
Nope, he's frozen.
He can't
Right.
sit that still.
All right. But he hasn't been booted yet? All right, I sent him a note. Oh, there we go. We'll let him sign back in and then we'll move on. So I was just saying, once we get to the discussion, I just wanted to go over kind of what that process looked like again for the folks who are listening tonight. Still no Scott. Well, I'll just take this opportunity, then I'll just go over it now. So just a reminder for if people weren't able to kind of see the meeting last week. So the way that the pay equity review works is that the staff members whose positions are up for review, they fill out a questionnaire. That questionnaire goes to their supervisor, and their supervisor will provide feedback. After that questionnaire and the feedback is given, then that information is sent to the consultant to review and to create the job description off of. After he creates the job description, that is again then sent back to the employee and their supervisor to review and make any changes to that. And then it's sent back to the consultant, who will then make the grade determination based on this. And so from that system, and so that is the consultant is outside of the district as a neutral party, which I think is important. And so what came from there is that we're voting on these 3 changes. And so there were only a couple that needed to be changed. So really 26 out of the 29 positions that were looked at were graded properly, and there's only 3 that are kind of switching. And that's just because something has changed within these jobs, and their grade needs to be reflected of that. And so as Jen had mentioned last time, the grading is not indicative of someone's value to the school district, or to our students, or to the work that they do. It's simply kind of a matter of what their job duties entail. And so as we look at that, that's where these changes had come from. So I don't think Scott ended up getting back on though. But
You texted him, right, Kelsey?
oh,
I just
He's-
texted him, so we'll
yeah,
see.
he just said he's rebooting.
All the way from
Zoom
the
is
beginning.
not letting him back in.
Okay.
So, but yeah, does anyone have any questions about that process? I know we've gone over it before. Which I just want to make sure that everyone understands it. Nope, still nothing. It's funny how I feel like rebooting takes forever now that computers move so fast.
Hey, Dave, while we're waiting for Scott, why don't you hit us with a show tune?
What was that, Brian?
Are you going to sing for us?
I still want you to hit us with a show tune, pal.
Something from
I don't
Broadway.
think you want to hear me sing.
Hamilton's on Disney Plus next week.
I'm stoked. I know. I'm totally stoked.
I'm getting my 2-week free trial just to watch it.
Oh, that's great.
There he is.
Hey, Scott.
I'm back. I have no idea what happened, but it took a quick reboot, and here I am. So
Just so you know, while you were gone, we voted for you to sing a couple of Hamilton show tunes for us.
sweet. We have the entire Hamilton soundtrack. I heard you chatting about Disney Plus, which July 3rd going to be a big day. We actually saw Hamilton when we were in London. And I thought maybe the English version would be different, but it's not. It still ends the same.
America still
comes into being, but yeah, it was awesome.
All right, so I was just going over kind of the process that Jen had talked about at the work session for how the pay equity worked, because we had a couple people email with some questions about that. So I just wanted to review that tonight before the vote. So
great.
Is there a motion to approve the changes to the pay equity review?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Right. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up is the approval of school resource officer and traffic control agent program agreement renewal. So like crossing guard.
So move.
All right, it looks, all right. Do we need to read?
Kelsey, it could be what I'm looking at in board book, but it looks like what we're talking about, what's on this, under that item are not the same. It could be just be something I'm clicking on wrong. So it's probably
Yeah, I looked at it earlier and it was correct. I did have a couple of comments on this one.
Okay.
First of all, Tim Collins is still listed as the signee as superintendent, so that needs to go away. And then on the crossing guard, the dates are still for I think they go through the 2019-2020 school year, so that needs to be updated. I think it's on like the very last page is the second one. And the Tim Collins piece is on the signatory page for the SRO.
Yeah, page 7 is
recent. It's there.
Jen?
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think this is the most updated attachment. I know Jeff had been working on this, and there's something more recent, but maybe it just didn't get shared with Becky.
Yeah, it could be.
That would definitely be the case.
All right. Does this need to be approved tonight, or can this be approved next month? Is that we can approve it next month?
Yes.
Okay.
We should move it
All right.
and get the right attachment.
All right.
And
then
I just had one more thing on this topic, and I am in no way advocating for this whatsoever. I'm merely putting it up as a thought or discussion point for the board, and that is around having an SRO engaged with the school. And the only reason I am bringing this up, it certainly has nothing to do with my experience with SROs in our school district. It has been absolutely nothing but positive from my standpoint. However, there are school districts within the state, within the country, that are disengaging from that type of arrangement. So again, not advocating, simply putting it up there that maybe before we just jump into a contract, that perhaps we have a thoughtful discussion and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea. And even connecting with Mike Johnson and some of the students at the school and see how their experiences have been as well, just to make sure we have that feedback going into it in determining the contract.
Right.
Especially, I mean, we don't have the right contract in there anyway. This is not getting approved tonight. So.
And we also use our SRO at the other site. So I'd certainly want to hear feedback from other administrators. I would say that it's important, probably for both parties, that we have a way to get out of what if we were to enter into a contract, that a component of that should be a 30-day notice to leave the contract. And I know Jeff was talking with them about that.
Yeah. In looking at the contract that is online, it looked like that was very much a one-way. That the city could exit the arrangement, but that the school district could not.
Well, and it felt a little unclear to me, the timeline for that. Like there was just one statement about it, and it wasn't clear. Like you just couldn't do it in the last 6 months, but other than that, it didn't have a lot of information. So, I know that we had talked with Jeff about that in previous discussions of this item. So hopefully that we can get a hold of a more current contract, and then including administrators from multiple sites.
Yeah.
Talk about the associated value.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
Okay, good. Glad I said something.
Yeah. And Bob, I think that a lot of that will kind of be up to you to try to reach out and get that information on for us. Just making sure you're up for that.
Yep. Duly.
Okay, great. All right, so we will look at that again possibly next month, or maybe August if we need to get some more information. All right, next up is the approval of Sternow and Associates Employee Assistance Plan Agreement. So, I'm not sure how long we've been in this agreement with them, but I know they've really been a great asset to the schools.
Yeah, I want to say it's over a decade. For some reason, 13 or 14 years sticks in my head.
Yeah, I know it's been a while, so. All right, so do we have a motion to approve the agreement?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up, approval of recommended quote for property liability and workers' compensation insurance. Yep.
So I can speak to that one.
Okay.
Oops. Okay. I'll just quickly hide that. Okay, so our property and liability insurance is through MIST, which is a self-funded group of school districts. And the increase this year, this is what I kind of mentioned in the budget, is going up roughly 68%. So our total will be that $266,250, and that's the price that it will not exceed. So they are continuing to work with the markets to secure improved pricing. And then also there's workers' comp and the McGuire agency fee. That's actually a small decrease. So that will be $187,076. So MIST did provide us with a little bit of an update. Basically, I mentioned already MIST, it's the Minnesota Insurance Scholastic Trust. It's a member-owned property and liability insurance cooperative in Minnesota. It was formed in 2013 with 7 districts. It has grown now to 24 members. So for this year, the increase, they're basically saying that after having steady decreases in the property market over the past 9 years, the property insurance market has fundamentally shifted overnight. For Minnesota, some of the changes are the ongoing wind and hail losses. There's a more comprehensive computer modeling that's predicting weather claims. So Minnesota was historically a safe area, and now over time that's no longer true. The other thing that's playing into this is COVID-19 is changing the market. So the effects of the pandemic are still largely unknown by carriers. So they're taking a very conservative approach to providing new renewals. And then just the financial market instability, and then the civil unrest going on throughout the US. So the last piece of it is just that the losses, you know, our group has an 80% loss ratio with the program carrier, which means basically for every dollar that the group, every dollar paid to the group's insurance carriers, they have paid back 80 cents in claims. So right now, I do know that they're continuing to look for cost savings. So this is kind of our worst case scenario. And it's not just through the MIST program, it's all property and liability carriers at this point. So my recommendation would be to approve what we have here, knowing that there might be a slight savings. And then for the next fiscal year, we could look more thoroughly at other providers. But I do know that all districts are kind of in the same boat for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jen?
So Jen, you so what you're saying is you have looked at other alternatives. You know for a fact that this just seems to be the overall experience. Let me be blunt. Are we stuck? Are we just jammed up in this just because of where we're at? Just because I know insurance companies are a business of not paying claims. So are we just kind of jammed up in this?
I think for 2021, we are. We're part of that group.
All right.
It would, to try to find something different at this point, it wouldn't benefit us. But for 21, 22, I think we could continue to look at other options.
That's fair. Thanks, Jen.
Any other questions? All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Sorry, I've asked this so many times today. Now it's just flitting out. Okay. Approval of prime food service vendor agreements. So there's quite a few on here. Lisa?
So moved. This is a pretty standard practice.
Second.
Yeah. All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up, bid recommendation for early childhood renovation at high school site.
So move in accordance with the recommendation from Wald.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, did something just change? No. Approval of food service memorandum of understanding to staff the summer food service program. So, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right.
Just a thank you to our food service employees. They do a fantastic job.
Yep. Yeah, they did amazing this past school year, and for setting up for the summer and making sure our kiddos get food Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Yep.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, the designation of the identified officials with authority for the MED External User Access Recertification System. And so we're looking at putting Dr. McDowell on to act as the, I don't know if that's actually pronounced Iowa, but the IOWA, and Missy Williams as well. And so we had approved this for Interim Superintendent Peshta, and so this is just updating it now that Dr. McDowell is taking over as super. So
Move.
Second.
all right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. The last action item for tonight is the approval of the official district posting. So do we have a motion to designate the Pioneer Press?
Lisa, you're on.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So our future meetings, there we go. On the 8th, we have our work session. The 10th is a facility committee, and on the 22nd is our regular board meeting. So, all right, now at this point, I'm pulling it up so that I remember how to do this. So I'm going to ask for a motion, if you recall, to close the session. And so I will take a motion to adjourn to a closed session, and then we'll need a second on that. And then HCTV will stop broadcasting, but Becky will continue to record. And then once HCTV is no longer with us, we can call the closed session to order. And then, yep, Bob?
Kelsey, just, you want to notify the public why you're closing the session.
Yep.
Just put
Thank
that.
you. So, yep, so we will be closing the session to discuss our admin contract negotiation strategy. And so we've done this before in a typical board meeting. It just seems different because we're on Zoom. But this is to discuss our negotiations. All right, thank you for pointing that out.
So someone needs to make a motion to that effect.
I move that we adjourn to a closed session at this time.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, so we have adjourned to a closed session. So we are back to our regular board meeting then. And so at 9:06, the meeting can be adjourned.